1, 2, 3, 4.
Alive and well, I'm wide awake. Won't take your brand, I'm not your slave. You serve your God, Lord of the flies. I pity you when you meet mine. Lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes. Your bloody mouth unsatisfied. God sees the trap you set for me. He'll not be mocked, I will be free. We will not bend, we will not break. How dare you touch what God gave? We'll never give in, never give up, never back down, never surrender, never surrender. Your fear will not make me behave. I won't march in your masked parade. Your hollow threats won't shut me up. I won't bow down, enough's enough. You say you'll give us what we need, as if you own the air we breathe. Stand up 100 million strong. Thought we'd lie down, well you thought wrong. We will not bend, we will not break. How dare you touch what God gave? We'll never give in, never give up, never back down, never surrender, never surrender. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, just keep going, keep on going. Jesus with me every step. Never give in, never give up, never back down, never surrender, never surrender. Your fear will not make me behave. I won't march in your masked parade. Your hollow threats won't shut me up. I won't bow down, enough's enough. You say you'll give us what we need, as if you own the air we breathe. Stand up 100 million strong. Thought we'd lie down, well you thought wrong. We will not bend, we will not break. How dare you touch what God gave? We'll never give in, never give up, never back down, never surrender, never surrender. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, just keep going, keep on going. Jesus with me every step. Just keep going, keep on going. Walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Just keep going, keep on going. Jesus closer than my breath. Just keep going, keep on going. Alive and well, I'm wide awake. Won't take your brand, I'm not your slave. You serve your God, Lord of the flies. I pity you and you meet mine. Lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes. Your bloody mouth unsatisfied. God sees the trap you set for me. He'll not be mocked, I will be free. We will not bend, we will not break. How dare you touch what God gave? We'll never give in, never give up, never back down, never surrender, never surrender. Your fear will not make me behave. I won't march in your masked parade. Your hollow threats won't shut me up. I won't bow down, enough's enough. You say you'll give us what we need, as if you own the air we breathe. Stand up 100 million strong. Thought we'd lie down, well you thought wrong. We will not bend, we will not break. How dare you touch what God gave? We'll never give in, never give up, never back down, never surrender, never surrender. I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Just keep going, keep on going. Jesus with me every step. Just keep going, keep on going. Walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Just keep going, keep on going. Jesus closer than my breath. Just keep going, keep on going. We will not bend, we will not break. How dare you touch what God gave? We'll never give and never give up, never back down. We'll never give and never give up, never back down. We'll never give and never give up, never back down. Never surrender. The valley of the shadow of death. Just keep going, keep on going. Jesus with me every step. Just keep going, keep on going. Walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Just keep going, keep on going. Jesus closer than my breath. Just keep going, keep on going.
Hey everyone, it's looks like I'm unmuted. I think I'm unmuted. It's May 1st. We're into May. Oh my gosh. Morel season is upon us here in Illinois. It is Town Hall number 29, and we've got plenty to bring up to you all having to do with this ballot shakedown that's still happening. We have plenty of people who have unfortunately not made the cut. A lot of shaking of the tree, and we've got a lot of news stories going on that if I go through our banners, I could just read them all off. But we've got Republican judges, we've got all kinds of interesting things that might be happening that Teresa is going to be sharing. I know that Ben has a lot of news that he's lined up as well. So just stick tight. In 1 minute, we're going to bring you everything we can.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Rebuild Illinois, where we get to talk about how we, the people, take charge and make Illinois a great place to live again.
Look who we got back with us this time.
Ooh.
Everyone's here. The gang is all here. And I'm looking yellow and jaundiced. I don't have my color tuned correctly. I'm sorry, guys.
I'm looking kind of orange.
Orangey. Yeah, okay. Now we're all messing with lights. Anyway, how you been, Teresa? I haven't seen you in a couple of weeks. It's good to have you back.
Yeah, I had a lot to process personally, in
Yeah.
my personal life. But yeah, glad to be back tonight. Ready to go. Yes.
And Ben is hanging with us as well. I've got him. I'll unmute him for his sake while I get myself a drink.
Well, thank you. We're doing our last minute, flight of the bumblebee, trying to get our last things ready.
Yeah. We were definitely throwing some things at the wall here at the last 15 minutes, but
that's because we have a lot to discuss this time around.
I'm excited. I'm gonna just sit back and listen. Then you guys just keep loading up the hopper, and I'll push buttons.
Okay. Well.
Okay.
So,
do we want to go
Teresa?
ahead?
I think Teresa's gonna head up our A block, and she's got some news on something
we have
happening in
lots
Cook
of
County.
news this time.
So
yeah.
I'm gonna let her run for a second.
Okay. Well, we do have some interesting news in Chicago. As we've been saying this whole time, that there are no Republicans running for any of the judgeships in Chicago and Cook County. So I have this and went ahead and put this together. There are 3 Republicans running against 2 Democrats to fill Judge Grebner's vacancy, which is in Cook County. Now, that judge is stepping down. However, out of the 2 Democrats that are running, we have James Jack Costello, who has never run for any office that I can see. And then we have Joe Gump. Not related to Forrest Gump.
Not related. I was going to ask. Forrest keeps visiting our show. On a
At least I
regular
don't think so. We might want to check with that. Now, Joe Gump actually ran against the incumbent that is leaving, and ran against that incumbent in 2020 in the Democrat primary, but did not do very good even in the primary. Only got 17% of the vote. So I think Joe Gump is kind of a weak candidate if you couldn't even get through a primary.
Right.
Now, on the Republican side, we do have a candidate who, Dominic.
Butita?
I don't even want to try that one.
No, is that right? Butita? I'm gonna go with Butita.
I'll let you try to pronounce
let
that
me throw
one.
myself off the cliff for the sake of the team.
Because it looks like, I mean, I'm sorry, I've got a teenager and 2 preteens
It's
in my
Butita
house.
Junior, by the way, not.
Yeah.
To get specific.
And so Dominic has, from what I can see, has never run for any
mainly
public
because
office.
they can't spell it.
Yeah. Or people are afraid to pronounce it.
That's right.
Maybe he should have truncated his name on the ballot. That's something that he could have done.
If you truncate it, you just end up with butt, and that's not.
I don't know why, but I keep thinking.
I was thinking that, but people would remember it.
That reminds me of Buttigieg. You know, where he had to say "boot edge edge."
Yes.
To get people to pronounce it. Anyways, so it looks like he's never run for any other office, but I could be wrong. I didn't do some deep dives into him. Now, the other 2 that are running on the Republican ticket, both have run before, lost, but lost very closely. Christine Svensson ran in. I'm sorry, when I see Sven, I keep thinking of Sven from what was it? Frozen.
Yes, the snowman.
I'm sorry, I have all daughters, so
everything's frozen.
It was there for a couple of years.
Yeah.
But Christine,
I'm right there with you. Got a daughter.
We actually have daughters by the same name. In case the audience didn't know that. So we have to say yours or mine, which one? And so Christine ran in 2018 against Judge Bitar, but she only lost by a little bit. She had 45.7% of the vote, which means she was very close. Very close. And Gary William Searing lost in 2020 when running against Judge Grobner, the one that's leaving office. And Gary actually lost that seat by only a little bit too. He actually got 45.2% of the vote. So these are 2 candidates that came very close to winning and should be able to pull it off in the general election, because they actually made it through the general election, or through the primary to the general election, and each of them almost booted someone off. So we have 2 very weak Democrats running against an iffy Republican and 2 very strong Republicans. So this is a huge chance for the Republicans to take this seat in Cook County in a judgeship. I think that this is teed up just perfectly. I really think that if Christine or Gary get through the primary as the winner for that seat, as the Republican primary winner, that we could very well see a Republican judge in Cook County.
Wow. That would be a big plus.
That's almost like having a unicorn, isn't it? It's
just
like
about
magical.
Magic.
Maybe it's a sign of the times. Maybe
we are going to flip the state.
There we go.
Maybe.
So that's the good news on the judgeship. Did you want me to go ahead and do the challenges, or you want to wait on that?
We're gonna wait, and that's in B block.
Oh, okay.
So,
then I think Ben has a very interesting, provocative story.
We are going to talk about sex.
Oh, no. Not again.
Can't
This is where we're
escape
going.
the subject. Yeah, I know. It's unfortunately, we're not talking about consenting adults here. We're talking about sex education of some very young minors. And it's come out, there are a couple articles that are out about the Skokie Evanston School District and what they are now going to be teaching children as young as preschool about sex. And even if it were just that, it still is, you got to say it's inappropriate. I mean, there's always an age appropriate level of education that needs to happen. You got to wonder, do preschoolers really need to hear about it? But it gets worse because it's not just sex, it's also sexual identity. And so, for example, then let me explain what's going on at the state level and the national level with this. State level, Governor J.B. Pritzker signed two bills. One of them was SB, as we learned, at Senate Bill 818 into law, claiming that the new sex ed standards that require kindergartners and preschoolers to learn to define gender identity.
Isn't that nice?
Yeah. And we're not talking male, female here. We're talking anything that might be in between according to their standards. The new law, which is, by the way, is already in effect, all right, requires public schools in the state that offer sex education to align the curriculum with national sex education standards, passed, of course, by very progressive liberals. And also,
would you like me to pull up that article and put it on the screen?
Yeah, just if you could, just see where we're getting this information from. We're not pulling it out of thin air. But not only do they have to conform to these standards, but they also have to create organizations that advocate for sex ed consistent with abortion rights and LGBTQ inclusion. So Illinois lawmakers, this wasn't something that was like everybody agreed on the left and they just pushed it over. No, there are actually people in both parties saying that, look, this is wildly inappropriate. It doesn't need to be in schools, but it got passed anyway. And he had State Rep Tony McCombie, sorry if I mispronounce it, he said during the debate on the bill in last May that the goal of sex ed is to help young people grow into healthier sexual relationships and healthier adults. And wow, all I got to say with that again is sex ed in itself is not necessarily a bad thing, in that usually traditional sex ed was based on more the biology of it rather than what's going on now. A lot of these bills or the curriculum, I should say, has in it not only this idea that you should accept these alternate gender identities, which often go against what parents may be teaching at home. Yeah, there you go. See, so what is it? Boy, girl, boy and girl, boy and something else, or yeah,
boy.
It includes teaching pronouns. It includes, of course, acceptance of this idea that children are sexual beings. And that's something that we should all be concerned about, because naturally saying, children are not sexual beings. That's something that comes later in life, usually after puberty hits. Mm-hmm. But the new sex ed really drives the ideas home that they are supposed to be sexual beings, and there's a good chance that they are not the gender that they were assigned, put that in quotes, assigned at birth. And this is taught as low as preschool. And of course, we'll talk more later about what parents can do about this. We'll talk about that in the D block. But you need to understand that the Skokie Evanston School District, that's 56, they're not the only ones doing this here in Illinois. And it's any school that teaches sex ed, by the way, not health, sex ed. If they teach sex ed, they're supposed to follow these standards now, and they're supposed to, what outside of school we would call this grooming. Let's face the fact: pedophiles do this stuff. They try to
define that
conditions and
define that a little clearer. Grooming is basically like trying to set someone's mindset.
Exactly.
It's a programming of sort. I mean, explain that. I think
a good way to explain grooming is that most kids, I don't know how you two reacted the first time you found out how babies are made.
Mm-hmm.
But my reaction was somewhere along the lines of, ew,
yeah,
that's disgusting. And pretty much any kid would say that's disgusting. I mean, even young kids, they see mom and dad maybe, give each other a peck on the cheek or on the lips. But when they find out that there's more involved in more passionate kissing, they think that's disgusting, which at their age it is. And when you start bringing up topics of where babies come from and get more in depth, it seems very disgusting to them. And grooming is a way of easing a child
normalization,
into the normalization that this is good, this is healthy, this is fine. You should be doing this at this age.
right.
And that's where it's to break down that ew factor.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And they do it with the idea of, hey, this is something you can do with, I'm not going to say no. They want the children to believe that's something that they can do with them, and it's normal for that to be the case. And so obviously that's what grooming is, really. And so what we're seeing is those same steps being taken in sex education here in Illinois. Now, I talked to my cousin up in Wisconsin, who's a teacher there, and she said, no, they don't do any of that stuff. They stick to, more traditional teaching. So the question is, why do we see this here in Illinois, and what can we do about it? And we'll talk about that in D block.
And just to kind of dovetail on that, I remember talking to my mom about stuff when I was younger, and she said that when she was a kid, and mind you, she's in her 70s, but when she was a kid, they weren't even nothing was explained to them. They didn't understand the changes in their body. And we went from no information to, I think, during our generation, it was
that's
more
used
of
as an excuse now in this generation. They're like,
right.
Because you had nothing, we're so much better. We're overloading. Yeah.
Right. They're trying to explain that this will prevent the onset of sexual activity in the earlier years. But this is actually what they're teaching is going to do exactly the opposite, because they're normalizing sexual activity in younger kids.
Right.
So no longer is it going to be looked at like a normal activity that's kind of taboo and still make it all the more exciting for adolescents. Now we're looking at kids that aren't even preteens.
Right.
Yeah, but we've moved from nothing to, I think during our generation, it was girls and boys were separated, first of all. Do you guys remember that?
Oh, yeah.
And the girls were taught, here's how your body is changing and here's why. Mm-hmm. And boys were taught, here's how your body is changing and here's why. And it was like, okay, now we understand that, we're fine with it. It's not going to be scary when certain things happen. Now we've moved to this extreme. And I don't know about anyone else. I consider this extreme.
Right.
I honestly cannot imagine this getting any worse.
Now, understand the policy on this, okay, is that, yes, parents can opt their children out of this education. But schools have no requirement to inform the parents that it's happening. They have to post the curriculum out there on, in the internet,
Right.
but they don't have to actually inform the parents.
Dude, anything that
that
they're not willing to inform you on is nothing they need to be teaching.
Yeah, I would tell you though, schools in Illinois don't take that approach. In that the way. And I taught for 3 years in a high school here in Illinois, and what was explained to me is that parents are definitely involved in the school, but between the hours of, I think it was 7:30 and 3 o'clock, which were
Right.
the school hours, parents had no influence whatsoever. They had no authority to be in the school. So that's the, if you will, the mindset of public education here in Illinois.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And I don't
that
know where
once
it's
they
at
walk
where
through the
you are.
doors, they're ours, and you can't touch them. They even
Yep.
lock the school doors.
Yeah.
Try and get into your kids' school just to bring them their lunch that they forgot when they were in the rush to get out of the house. You can't get in. You can only get to the office, and then there's usually a door that's locked. I tried to get in years ago just to get my own records
Right.
because I was applying to law school and I needed something. I couldn't get in, and I'm sitting here trying to call on my cell phone to call the office and say, "Let me in. I'm trying to come pick up my records."
Right.
Yeah.
You
Right.
can't get in.
And if anyone's had these types of experiences, let us know in the comments. Let us know what area you're from. We're curious to know exactly whether or not this is something we're seeing in in our state alone. I know there's people probably watching not in Illinois. I know we're trying to gain that audience since
Now,
rebuild Illinois here.
I know how all three of us take this. We're like not our children,
Right.
but really,
Homeschooling family here.
parents need to be aware of what's going on in their schools. And obviously, like we said, with this happening, is not enough parents are aware, or else this never would have got this far.
Yeah.
But we definitely need to take action as parents when it comes to our children's education.
Sure.
And
So why don't we
should be
move on
successful.
with the next news item here, because
Yeah.
we could probably make a whole show about this alone.
Oh, we could do a month of shows literally every day just on this topic.
So
Okay. Well, the Chicago City Council actually approved Mary Lori Lightfoot's proposal to give $12.5 million worth of gasoline and transit cards to city residents,
wow.
with the taxpayers funding the plan. Now, this plan is called Chicago Moves, which and was approved by the Chicago City Council by a vote of 26 to 23 on Wednesday. Now, what I find very interesting is that it's such a very close vote. So they barely passed it, it looks like. And the cards have Lightfoot's name on them, which obviously sounds like a re-election gimmick to me. I don't know about the rest of you. Now, I'm a little offended.
A lot of people, even Democrats, are concerned that that's exactly what this is it's a re-election gimmick. And
Right.
according to election law,
Obama phones all over again.
Yeah, I wanted to look this up. I just ran out of time before the show, but there are certain things you cannot do in an election. One of those is to give free things
Vote for
away.
me and get a free pony.
Yeah, exactly.
Ice cream cones for
As-
everybody who votes for me.
A pen is one thing, but a gas card or a public transit card, that's buying votes, and that I think is going to fall afoul of election laws.
But it's nothing. I mean, as part of the plan, the city is actually only handing out a measly 50,000 gas cards and 100,000 public transportation cards. So I don't know. Of course, I'm joking. I'm being very sarcastic there. I wish I was getting one. Could someone give me a gas card? Because I know every time I go to gas up, I actually get ticked off. I could be smiling, having a great day, and when I get back in the car, I just start grumbling like a bear. And even my kids are like, "Mom, are you okay?" And I'm like,
I find myself putting off filling up my SUV because it tops $100 every time now.
It's painful. Who
It,
thought
it
getting
is.
gas would be painful? It is.
It feels like you got a ticket, not gas.
Yeah, it
Right.
does. It does.
You're getting
It does.
punished for driving.
You almost want to sit there and look underneath your car and see if like the gas is leaking or something. And the other day, I not only had to go and get gas for my car, which was almost on E, my SUV actually. I actually also had to get some gas in my gas can for my lawnmower. So I was not happy that I was getting all this gas, and I did not like it. So if Lori Lightfoot wants to send one of those cards to me, I'm not gonna send it back, honestly. But remember, this is going to be paid for by us.
It isn't gonna win your vote, is what you're saying.
But here's the thing. Well, and here's the thing. We're all going to pay for it, even though
Right.
I don't know about
you
you,
already
but
did pay for it.
I already paid for it.
Everybody in Cook County will.
But I didn't get a gas card. Did you get a gas card, Christian?
No, but I do live in Cook County, so I bought that.
What
gas
about you,
card.
Ben?
I did not get a gas card. I live in Will. I mean, we don't do that here, but we do have high gas taxes.
So none of us
You know
got
where
our
she got
cards.
this idea from, right?
What?
Pritzker, through another mandate, postponed the increase in gas taxes. And by law, he's requiring every gas station to put a notice on every pump that says that Pritzker kept that from happening until December, right after the elections.
Slightly hypocritical. I mean, we put notices on pumps like I did that Biden, and we get in trouble for that. So,
Yeah.
Actually, I think I have an idea who's behind that, but I'm
The pumps, the gas stations will actually get in trouble if they don't post the sign.
yeah, but we'll get in trouble if we do post it.
Anytime that you have mandated information like that, you've got to question, is this government interference? And in this case, tyrannies control information, and tyrannies do stuff like this, build up their name
Sure.
at the expense of the people. And we're seeing that happen right here in Illinois.
So basically, he wants a sticker on the pump. It's been mandated that stickers be put on the pump that basically say, I didn't do this. This isn't my fault.
I didn't do this.
Right.
Don't blame me for this.
I saved you a quarter of a cent on every gallon.
Before inflation.
Yeah. So, hey, I know you can't get a job, but at least I saved you that quarter of a cent.
Oh, I figured out why we're having problems with all of this, the gas issues and these gas cards. And the Democrats are using that new math, right? They must have all gotten that Common Core math, right?
I think you're on something. You might be on to something there.
Maybe we need to send them for some remedial old school
Long
math.
division.
Yes.
How about just basic balancing a budget?
Adding and subtracting. Yeah, I think they need to.
Yeah.
Did they ever learn how to borrow and carry?
Oh, they know how to borrow.
Borrow really well.
They got that down.
And they're carrying.
Yeah, it's everybody else carries.
Right. So next up in the news cycle, I don't know if we've killed that death story. Or not, but,
so let's talk.
You had something that you said came from 560 The Answer. I'm pointing that out for a reason here. Why don't you?
Okay. Well, in this happens, you're going to see a lot more coming up as we get closer to the primary and then again to the general election. You're going to see a lot of polls, that essentially show one candidate ahead of the other and how close the race is. And so this is one that came out this week from that was announced by 560 AM, The Answer, where they said that Darren Bailey and was it Michael Urban?
Richard Urban.
Richard Urban are they're in a statistically dead heat in the polls for the Republican primary, each with 27%. This is most likely.
I don't
Now,
need
keep
the
in
right to
mind,
smash that. I don't know where their numbers are from. Is it from listeners? Are they
I
calling people?
yeah, and unfortunately, I don't know.
Mm.
The source here is 5:60 a.m. And
We got friends. We'll have to call them and ask how they did
having
that.
studied polling and the things that go on, one of the things that really affects that happens to be advertising, and we've seen a lot of advertising of Richard Irvin lately
Oh my God.
that is
Huh?
coming out. So some of the bump where they're doing the polls
This
is
gal here pointed out where that money's coming from.
right. So, but wherever they did conduct the polls, these are obviously having an impact. Now, keep in mind, we haven't seen a lot of Darren Bailey advertisements yet, and there's a reason for that. He's saving it for closer to the primary, which is always a smart strategy. Irvin didn't because he couldn't. He had to come out now to build his momentum against Bailey, who had a commanding lead before Richard Irvin started spending the money on that. So that right now is where it stands. Bailey, of course, his campaign still retains a higher sense of credibility in the election claims because of his fight against the governor's mandate. That's something I just point out. So we'll have to see how it goes on in the long term. Now I know, Christian, you have a different poll with
Well,
different
and I wanted to
results.
talk. That's kind of what I wanted to talk with you about a little bit here. Is that
Mhm.
I don't know the source of these polls, and a lot of times you'll see news organizations regularly say we've done this poll, we've done that straw poll. At least if you show up. I mean, my first experience with a straw poll was at CPAC, and that meant that everybody who was attending got a vote, and we had the opportunity to
Yeah.
vote or not to vote, and we had an idea of how many people voted, and we knew who that group was, and you kind of know the mind share of that room just looking around the room. This isn't like we didn't like poll people coming out of the subway. We
And
polled people who paid money to go listen to the conservatives,
there's
right?
always an inherent bias in those polls because of that, and that's a problem with every poll. In fact, like
Sure.
I told you earlier, part of the reason that Hillary Clinton lost her campaign is because lost the presidency is her campaign spent a lot of time polling in places where she was popular. They didn't make a concerted effort to go out into the country, to poll in average places where they would get maybe a different result. And because of that, they felt comfortable that they had this lead that didn't really exist because they did very incorrect polling running up to the election that showed that that she had a commanding lead. And if you do polling in places like Chicago as a Democrat, you're going to poll much better than a Republican, just because that's where Democrats tend to congregate. So it really makes a difference where and with what audience a poll is taken.
Sure. And but I think that was the interesting point for me. Yeah, Rick, you make a good point here. A lot of trash talking in the mail from Irving. We've seen that right here. I think I
Yeah,
have that one right here, guys.
and
Yeah, that
we mentioned he we don't agree with that. Teresa and I don't agree with that, but I can tell you his mindset was he had to bring Bailey down a couple notches. So he put out those negative ads against the Bailey campaign in order to help, reduce the
and
difference
he's not the only
between.
one that ignored Teresa's advice of do not fight, no infighting on our side of the fence.
Hey,
Um,
Well,
there are
and it
third
doesn't
parties
help you.
doing it now.
It
yeah,
doesn't help you at all. All it
Mhm.
does is make you look like a bully.
right.
And I
Right,
mean,
because at the
yeah,
end of the day,
some
you
people.
got to stand up next to someone and endorse them when the primaries are over, and you're either going to look
Well,
like a stooge or you're going to look like a hero, and the
not to men-
much
not to
higher
mention,
odds on the stooge side.
all you're doing is if you're slinging mud, you know what? You're going to get some of that mud on yourself too.
I have
So
said that.
you're you're actually
Well,
making yourself both. You're actually bringing both of yourselves down. But I also go on the philosophy that if you have something truly positive to bring to the people, if you're really the best candidate, then talk about what you're going to do for the people.
Yeah.
Stop talking about your opponents and all of the negative stuff about them. The
Mhm.
voters will be able to see that you are the best
Well,
candidate.
and
Talk
so
about your solutions. Otherwise,
And
the only time you go to
we
mud
we
is when
see
you have
the
nothing
difference,
else to say.
right? We see the difference between the Bailey campaign and the Urban campaign in that, and Bailey is staying consistently on the message of his fight against Pritzker, which
Yeah.
is where he needs
That's where
to.
you have to keep that fight.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so that's smart. The other candidates are doing that as well, I think, but Urban believed that this is the only way that he's going to cover the ground between him and Bailey, and
Which I wanted to point out, all these polls, all these stats, like I said, that they are subject to where they polled, how many. Now,
the
if
types of
you're
questions they ask.
if you're new to our group, I think we got another comment in here. You changed all the leaders. I agree. I agree. But if you look at if you've ever looked at what we are doing in our YouTube channel, and if you check the QR code over Teresa's head right now up there in that corner, yeah, the majority of what we do in our community is on Telegram. Now, we've gone to Telegram because of the censorship efforts that have happened on Facebook. Amazingly, that's been lifted recently on Twitter. So who knows? Maybe we'll return to Twitter in force. But because
I'm planning on it. I'm planning on it.
And FYI, you guys do know that Twitter was bought out by an African American, right?
Yeah, it was one of my
He was
favorite
actually
African Americans of all
born.
time.
He was actually born in Africa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's also
Technically,
Canadian.
he is an African American, though he's
He's a
not what
Canadian
we
African
typically
American.
use that concern, that label for.
Yeah. But anyway, point
We
is,
could talk about that in another episode because it's interesting how
If you-
Elon Musk is
if you
actually
follow
spending
this
his
link,
money.
if you follow this link, you'll find that our community resides on Telegram, and the reason that I believe that we have done our best to build our community on Telegram, it's where it started, is because we've had the freedom of expression that we have not experienced on other platforms, and we have to do a lot of policing because of that, as Ben will tell you. And we have done our best to provide a community that in general gets to communicate its mind without, unless it's really nuts.
We get trolls, bots, and a lot of spam.
Yeah. So, but
take that out, and we still have over 1,500 members.
Oh yeah, and I think out of that 1,500, I think at least a third of you have participated. We saw in what is the Rebuild Illinois straw poll, which we just fired up a couple of days ago. Just sent it out there and said, here's who we have for sure. We know at least who's running for governor. We know at least who's running for Senate, for U.S. Senate. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that this Rebuild Illinois straw poll was going to be a real thing. So we sent out those results.
And let me say, one of those was not shocking to me, and the other one was actually quite shocking to me.
Yeah, so let me switch over.
Yeah, so this poll that we're going to see here is strictly amongst our Telegram base.
Yeah,
which is probably more conservative than the rest.
I think, hold on, I'm in the wrong tab.
The
Let me
average.
share the right tab.
My Christian.
I know. It's crazy that, okay, so I was trying to do
Now,
this.
remember what I said about the poll for the governor before, and we're going to see something different with this poll.
Oh my gosh. It's a little crazy, to be completely honest. So here is the results from that poll. Right here. So Keisha Smith won with 4 votes. No, wrong. So that was we're going to go from lowest to highest as we play through these. With Max Solomon came in second, Richard third down there. Ray
Of
Bond.
course, we know Emily Johnson is out.
Is she? My
yes,
gosh.
that will be the next story, I believe.
Wow. So yeah, we Rabine definitely is not polling neck and neck with Bailey, according to the
Right.
406 of you who are participated in that poll.
Yeah. Now, to be a really good poll, you need numbers well over 1,000. But
Yeah.
still, this is
Not bad.
it's not. It's 406 participants is nothing to sneeze at in a poll. So
Right. And like I said, this is not something that's we're an undisclosed group of people. You know, this is our people here in general.
And these are the diehard Republicans that are going to be voting, because remember that for a primary, it's you're just going after, it's just the Republican voters that are going to be voting in the Republican primary.
but it's only about 10% of
right.
the party that will actually vote in a primary.
Right.
The
So
rest
they're
of the
your
party comes out for the general, well, 60%, but most of the selection happens in the primary, and only about 10% of voters participate in a primary.
right. So the ones participating in the primary that will actually be participating in the primary are your diehard Republicans, the
Yeah.
ones that will step up and participate in that selection process for the primary, which is not your run of the mill Republican who typically votes just in general elections and not in any primaries. So Bailey, could certainly be leading in the polls, but that may be among all Republicans,
Yeah.
not just the hardcore, diehard Republicans that vote in primaries.
So unfortunately,
So-
Casey's up. We go down to the center. We actually had a higher response. Now I have a theory on this, and I want to point out, because we're talking about Telegram. The person who took the lead on this has a very strong showing on Telegram, probably one of the strongest that I've seen in the state of Illinois.
Sure.
He was one of the first ones kicked off of Twitter, mind you. And he had a monstrous following on Twitter. Looks like we got a couple who need to change those leaders. That's nice. So we got fun things to take care of here. Casey Shebelek came in at the bottom of this poll. I'm going to go ahead and play this one and show you kind of where this one ended up.
This is for senator, U.S. senator.
Python took 502 out of 535 votes. That
is amazing. Even with only 535 votes in it, that's something you can't just brush off as being insufficient data. Right. Even with a large margin of error, it's very clear, according to this poll, who's going to walk away with the nomination.
Right.
And Bobby Python, honestly, is not a bad one to see. And that's not to say that I don't like any that are on this list. I'm friends with a couple on the list, in fact. So
yeah.
Well, I just wanted to say thanks to everybody who participated in that poll. I hope to have another one after this primary. We'll do some more polling. This type of interaction is what we're here for. We want to know what you think about what's happening here. So.
And also to remember, when you're voting in these things, or when you're voting in the general or in the primary election, it's not a popularity contest. Please, people, don't think of it as a popularity contest. In a lot of these races, Ben, Christian, and I know multiple candidates, and we like them all as people. But remember, after you get through the primary, you have to take on a Democrat, and they're going to come at you with everything that they have. You have to be ready. You have to be a bulldog to go after them and to fight them. So just because you like someone's personality and you'd love to go out for coffee or out for a drink with them, doesn't mean that they have what it takes to take on the Democrat opponent. Yeah. We want to win this. So this isn't the time to be looking at the nicest person.
Well, the number one thing you need to look at is, what are their priorities?
Right.
What are their stated priorities? And that's the first thing you want to look at with any candidate. After that, the second would be, who's going to be in a stronger position going into the general. So, and the reason I say it there is because I'm of the mind that I'd rather go down with the right person than win with the wrong person.
Right.
And I say the same thing, when it comes to, experience. A lot of people say, well, experience counts for a lot. And I would say, well, experience doing the wrong thing doesn't count for anything.
Right.
Right.
So that's one of those things that, we really need to consider in
So
some elections.
So really the ideal candidate is someone who has the right values
Yeah.
and policies and mindset and has the ability to really take on that Democrat and win against the Democrat. That's the two prongs we really need in any candidate.
Absolutely.
You missing one of those, it's not even a fight.
Right.
Mhm.
Right. You got to have some boldness.
Because it is tough. I mean, I think I've said on here before, I was actually a very good candidate for state senate. I polled very well. Actually, I gained the largest Republican vote in history for the position. Still lost. So it's got to. I mean, you got to have somebody whose head is in the game when it comes to this, because it is an uphill battle here in Illinois.
It is.
All right, we need to move on here.
So yes.
That's the news for now. We have more updates, but those are in the B block as we go forward.
Okay.
When we talk about ballot updates.
Were we going to? Did we already handle Gary Rabine?
That's in the B block.
Oh, okay.
Because that's a ballot update.
Okay.
So the next thing though that's on the list, unless you want to do the updates and then talk about the long ballot after, or
Yeah, we can do that after. Let's go right into.
We'll talk about ballot updates now.
Oh,
and there have been a couple changes.
So you start with Sullivan?
Johnson.
Oh, are you starting with Johnson?
Yep.
All right, go.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So Emily Johnson and her running mate, Brett Mullen, were removed from the ballot because of issues with their petition sheets. Apparently, Mullen's name was crossed out on some of the petition sheets by Michelle Turney after they had already been signed, according to the records from the State Board of Election. Now, the petition sheets must be identical in the header, the top part of the petitions, and cannot be changed after they've been signed. So that is why they got knocked off of their out of the run for governor and lieutenant governor. So that's one of the changes. And then Ben.
Okay, so there was a challenge that failed where gubernatorial candidate Gary Rabine challenged rival Jesse Sullivan's petition signatures for the primary. And the Illinois State Board of Elections, in a meeting, decided that these Jesse Sullivan signatures were actually valid, and they essentially rejected the challenge from Gary Rabine, keeping Jesse Sullivan on the ticket.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got things to update on our spreadsheet.
Yeah. And then moving on, one of our gubernatorial candidates, which we've been kind of bringing up off and on, Keisha Smith. If you remember her, she actually was running for governor without a named lieutenant governor, which is actually required under state election law. So the State Board of Elections actually rejected her paperwork because of that.
Specifically, you have to have a named lieutenant governor candidate on your petition ballot. And so because she didn't do that, Teresa.
Oh, yeah. Because she didn't do that, all of her paperwork was rejected.
Wow.
Because of an objection alleging that she did not list this candidate for lieutenant governor. So you've got to know before you even run for office, before you start any process of doing that, you need to research and know what you're doing, what paperwork is required, what requirements are needed for the position. And she didn't do that, which I've never met her. I don't know her. But if someone can't find out that information for themselves and know the basic steps, and that they would need to list a lieutenant governor, then that would, I would imagine that would bring it into, cause anyone to question
Yeah,
her
whether
ability
they're
as a governor if she can't
Mhm.
follow some basic instructions.
Right.
So we've seen in this case 2 campaigns that were scuttled because they got the ballot wrong, the signatures wrong, the petitions.
So my poll was malformed. I didn't have the right information on the poll.
Well, that's okay. That's, you now know. So, but it's the basic thing. That's why we want to teach people, and why we go over things like the petition sheets and the importance of making sure you get it right, is so something as basic as this doesn't get you tripped up.
We're
when
down
you
to
file.
6 options on the primary for governor.
Yeah.
We're down from 8 to 6.
And should we go ahead and cover those unresolved challenges?
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So most of as we've talked about, you have to file your petition, and then others can challenge your petition. Well, a lot of those have been resolved, and this is what is left. There are a few that are still outstanding. For the U.S. House, only the 10th Congressional District, and that is a Democrat that we're still waiting to see what that decision will be. For Illinois Senate 43rd District, a Democrat, Eric Mattson, is we're still waiting on that. For the Illinois House 87th District, Republican Mary J. Buress, and Illinois House 95th District, Republican Tim Butler, and then a Democrat in the Illinois House 98th District, and then 2 people for Illinois appellate judge in the 1st District and the 2nd District. Both of those are Democrats. Actually, the rest are all Democrats. There's only 2 Republicans that we're waiting on, and that's for the Illinois House, the state rep, and that's in the 87th and the 95th districts. Everyone else, we're still waiting on Democrats, but we really don't focus too much on the Democrat side.
I think those both are here in Will County for the 2 Republicans.
Is from what I can see on the 87th of that one challenge, there's 3 people. You have Mary J. Burris, William E. Hauter, and Joe Alexander running for that. We have 3 that would be. I'm trying to highlight those that would actually need to have attention brought to them prior to the primary.
Right.
Because if you're in there alone, there's no one to primary against.
And we did have that happen in at least one race where there was only one Republican running for a seat, and they got challenged and booted off. So now the Democrat is running unopposed.
Interesting. So Burris is still, we have a question mark on that one, if she's going to survive that.
Burris and Butler.
I'm looking for Butler. I want to see if he's also in let's see, that's on the 95th, scrolling down. Yeah, he does.
He's still outstanding.
Kent Gray. He still has Kent Gray in there. So there is 2. They would be on the primary list.
So, yeah. Ben, what was your question?
So I'm going to guess at why they're still outstanding, because we went through this with one of my friends in the 2020 election. And in that case, what happens is they challenge specific signatures, and you have to then show why those are still good and valid. And we were able to get a lot of those overturned to where Eric Wallace, who was running for state senate at the time, only had to get like 12 affidavits signed. Right. And so he had essentially another 2 weeks to go get those affidavits signed. And in his case, because the number was so low, the opposition removed their challenge in that. And in this case, why those are probably still pending is because these people are trying to get affidavits for those signatures to show that they're actually valid and so they can stay on the ballot. That's probably why they're still open. So maybe they had to get 40 signatures or something, or 40 affidavits, which is, I mean, it's time consuming, but it's not impossible.
And then, of course, those cases, they can go through the courts, and then it can be appealed. I've seen that happen. So, and as you know, courts don't usually run very quickly.
And do we know of any others that have withdrawn or been dropped at all? Do we need to bring those up at all? I mean, because we need to have like a final tally of who's out there.
Yeah,
right?
I am actually working on the sheet. I've done the strike through for all the ones that have either withdrawn or been removed. Okay. So I've got that taken care of.
I think I need.
There are a lot of.
I think we're working on 2 separate sheets. We may have to sync them up again.
Yeah, but as far as like, there's a lot of cases where there's only one Republican left. So those are easy choices. Of course, they still need to be researched and vetted to make sure that they are good candidates before, I don't know if we ever want to talk about endorsements, but,
Sure.
And then of course, researching the candidates when there is a primary, when there's more than one person running for the primary. But, I don't know, Ben, did you have a primary challenger?
No, I did not.
Okay.
If I didn't run, there wouldn't have been somebody running in that position.
That was mine too.
That's sad.
And this year there's 3, but I think they're down to 2 because I think one is off the ballot. I'm not sure.
So we're going to get into the sample ballots next, correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right,
so we're going to talk now about a ballot here and what the ballots look like in Illinois. Illinois uses what's referred to as the long ballot, meaning that that they put everything down on one ballot for people to vote for, and it's both good and bad at the same time, and we'll talk about that in a little bit of detail. So if Christian, you want to pull up that official ballot example that I threw up there. Now this is from my election from 2020. So on there, the way they're generally laid out is they start with federal offices, then they go to state offices, and then to local offices. And the last thing that is on there normally will be any kind of question that may be present on the ballot. During this time, it was whether or not they should make a change to the Illinois state constitution, allowing the legislature to increase our income taxes at will. So what happens in this case, that's referred to as a long ballot because there's so much on it. I got to get where you're son. So understand that what happens in this case, oftentimes the way a ballot is laid out really does impact how people vote. And it's called decision fatigue. That's the actual term for it. And this happens when you have to make a lot of decisions at the same time. This often affects.
It's like what I used to do on tests in high school. They're all multiple choice. You're like, well, A. Some of them are going to be A.
Yeah, you take maybe the first 3/4 of the test seriously. You see you're running out of time, and you start.
You just start putting any answer in.
Right. It's better to leave it, put a guess than leave it blank. So that's what we tend to see happen. And so the research suggests that even the position on a ballot where a certain contest appears will determine how some people vote. So it tends to be then those positions that are higher on the ballot receive more votes overall than those toward the end of the ballot. And like I said, it's more likely if a proposal is higher up on the ballot, it's more likely to pass. If it's lower
So-
on the ballot, it's more likely to fail.
More likely, less likely.
Mm-hmm. So again, and this affects more
If
than
they don't know the
ballots.
names of anyone and they're just going to guess, you have a higher percentage of someone going tunk. And
Anytime you see a lot of decisions having to be made, for example, you go for you go on a spending spree, you got to buy clothes for the coming school year or something. Your choices in the beginning of that day happen to be a lot more intentional than those later on because, gosh, you're just tired and you got to get this, but
we deal with that in racing. That's pole position. You want the better
Yeah.
position in the race in order to finish higher.
By the way,
And I
this
and I
affects
hate to say-
professionals too. Judges are more likely to grant somebody parole if they're earlier in the day versus if they're later.
Really?
Yeah. So it's
You're
not.
gonna say, Teresa?
So yeah, and you even see this in courts too.
Mhm.
Judges are happier and everything in the morning. Towards the afternoon, they're exhausted, they're fatigued.
They want to go
But
home.
don't ever forget that there are, and I've seen it, not that I've done it, but I have seen people do this, where when they are fatigued, they will look at the name and say, that name sounds like a lawyer and I don't like lawyers. Or that name,
Reminds me
sounds
of
like,
something positive.
reminds me of my favorite teacher. So I'll vote for that person. I know it sounds really corny, but if they don't know, they may go on name.
Why
Google.
else? Why else do they do even the signage? If they're basically advertising to people who haven't done the research, the reason people do yard signs is to appeal to someone in the last moment.
It is, and that's why
Name
there's
recognition.
actually laws and ordinances and stuff on how far your sign has to be from. I think it's 100 feet from the polling place.
Ben,
But
I
you
think
want-
we have a question that's being fielded in
But-
here. I want
Sure,
But you
throw it up there.
No,
There's
no candidate. Do you have to fill in the circle for
No.
the single candidate?
No.
You never have to actually vote for all of the positions. If there's a position you don't feel good about voting for, you don't have to vote for it. Despite what some tell you, and some tell you, by some, I mean, there are party people out there tell you have to fill in every position. It's not true. On no election do you ever have to do that. So if you don't want to vote for president in that given year, you don't have to. You can skip it. But what tends to happen is it's not necessarily those front positions that are the problem. It's the later positions, and the later positions almost always are judges.
You have now completed voting. I like how they have to tell you to stop.
Yeah, and so when it comes to judges, that's perhaps the hardest one because the judges aren't listed.
There's no name recognition or familiarity for most of them.
Exactly.
And they're so localized, there's no major campaigns. This is where you have to get involved locally.
And unless you've been in a courtroom in the previous 24 months, you wouldn't know any of those names. But remember, voting is a right.
This is how I vote in the past, right here. Yeah. Maybe,
but remember,
I'm guilty of it.
Voting is a right, not an obligation. So to answer that question
in
before,
this country, it's not an obligation.
Right. So to answer that other question, you're not obligated to. You could go in, just vote for one candidate, and then walk out.
I would say
you're under
this:
no obligation.
It is not an obligation. It is a responsibility.
Yes.
Okay. And that's not to say that, like we're talking about, you have to vote for every office. Okay. But voting in general is definitely a responsibility of citizenship, unless you like to be called a subject, which tends to leave a bad taste in people's mouths.
Yeah, I was meaning that based on that question.
Take voting seriously, and what I would recommend is on every county election website, before an election, within 30 days, there's going to be a sample ballot for your precinct. Okay, so it's going to take a little bit of research. We can't do that for every precinct in Illinois. There are thousands of them. There are well over 100 precincts just here in Will County, and there are over 100 counties. So what you need to do then is to find that sample ballot. Oftentimes, the election offices will mail out a sample ballot. When you get that, check every name and do a little research and see if you like that person or not, especially the judges. Again, those are the hardest ones to tell whether they're good or not. So you have to do a little research to determine, whether this is somebody you want in that position.
There is a resource that I did find for judges. It doesn't have all of them by any stretch of the imagination, but it's called the Robing Room. And so there are people that give reviews.
Interesting.
So,
Blanket 55 says the GOP does a horrible job recruiting any position, especially judges.
Ben, were you recruited?
No,
I was not either.
I would say the new Republicans are doing a better job of this.
Doing it without the help.
Yeah, well, we're actually doing recruiting. So, like, if you look at the Republican Party in Will County, just about every single position on the ballot has a Republican on it. I think there's only one or two that don't this election cycle. And that's because we realize the importance of doing the recruiting and getting people on there. But that's not true across the state, and that's something that we need to fix. Part of the deal is if you look at the old school Republicans, they're more interested in retaining their power than they are in doing these things that need to happen to get the ballots filled out.
Yeah. And we're getting down to 58 days now until the primary. So we're just shy of 2 months at this moment. So
everything is going to change right after that primary, because then we're going to know who our candidates are for the general.
Yeah.
So you see now just how long the Illinois ballot is, and it can be longer. You see all the empty, columns over there for more positions. There's an entire column to the right of what you're seeing there that's empty. That's why it's called the long ballot. And the important part for all of us is to remember to try to get through the entire ballot with names that we want. And there's nothing wrong or nothing illegal with you writing down names of people you want to vote for and taking that in with you when you vote.
Yeah, don't try to do your research right there in the booth.
Yeah,
you'll get too exhausted.
Money mo. Write the names down and bring them with you.
Right, and remember to, before you go in, don't go in at the end of your day when you're exhausted, because you're more susceptible to that decision fatigue.
Mm-hmm.
So try and go earlier in your day, get it done, get it over with, and know that you did your civic duty.
So
what's next on our ticker? I mean, I know that
homework.
We've got one more on there. What's that?
Homework.
Oh, we are in that section.
I think the
really
best thing.
Tonight.
Yeah, I think that the best thing to do for homework is to research these candidates and reach out to your school boards. Tell them how much you hate this curriculum. We need to get this curriculum out of our schools.
Yeah.
And I do believe there was another, I don't know if you guys did one of this. I don't know if you talked about this on the previous weeks while I was gone, but there's even some schools that are putting litter boxes in the bathrooms. Maybe that's a future show. But there's a lot of weird stuff going on. Get active in your school board.
Feminine hygiene products in boys' bathrooms. So boys just use them to stick it to the wall. Seriously, parents, when it comes to what you've learned about education, the sex education being pushed here in Illinois, I would say this, and I don't say this lightly. Consider removing your children from public schools. And there are more than one way to do that. Okay. Homeschooling, I think all three of us have done that in the past or are currently doing that. I personally have two of my children in a private school and you're thinking, well, I can't do that. I can't afford it. Well, we couldn't either necessarily. But the school we put them in, we worked with the school to get a scholarship, and every private school will work with you to try to scholarship your children, at least to some degree. And that's something that you really need to look in. Especially, I will tell you this, maybe you're willing to donate to a school to get some other kid out. And the way there's a law here that caps the amount that you can get, that all of it, across Illinois, there's only so much that can be set aside into a 503c organization that does scholarships. However, that doesn't prevent you from donating to a church that happens to have a school. You can do that and an unlimited amount, donating it to the church and saying, oh, by the way, please use this for your school. Because then you're following federal laws with regard to, federal tax laws with regard to that donation. It's a 503c organization. It is tax deductible to the full amount, and you're not subject to limitations placed on you by Illinois. So that is a way to get around that limit and get your full donation in to help people get their children out of public schools. And again, I don't say that lightly. I don't say that there's no place for public schools, but the fact of the matter is, we parents are responsible for our children's education. When you get to heaven, God's not going to ask you what your public school did. They're going to ask you what you did. You have to take an active interest in your child's education. So if you believe that the schools may not be meeting your child's needs, and I'll talk about that in a future episode where we talk about the proficiency of students in public schools or the lack thereof.
Ultimately, you're responsible.
Consider a private school choice for your children and seeking help to help pay for it.
And remember, you're investing, far more than 18 years, but until they're adults, it's 18 years into your child. You're caring for them, you're raising them, you're feeding them, clothing them. You're doing all this to raise them with your values and to raise them a certain way. If you're sending them to a public school that's doing this kind of stuff, they're being indoctrinated. And when you give them a message that's different than what the school is giving them, and they're spending 6 or 7 hours a day in that school without being able to have you as context, they're going to start to think mom and dad are too old. They don't know what they're talking about. And it starts to turn the child against you. So you're investing.
That very idea that those are old values
outdated.
that don't apply anymore. So just because your parents may hold that value, you shouldn't follow that. That's what the schools are teaching them.
So basically, you're investing 18 years of your life into raising this person and the school is undoing everything you have worked for during those 18 years. They're taking those 18 years of sacrifice and love.
We don't turn them over at 18. Normally what it is you're basically saying, I don't have the time to raise this child. I want the state to raise it. That's really what the state has been pushing people into, and its entire society as a whole. We could soapbox on this for a couple hours. They want to make sure that you're working twice as hard and working 3 jobs and you don't have time to put into your kid. Don't worry, we got that. We got you covered because we want to raise your kids for you. And that's the system that you have to take concerted effort to work against, because it is working against you. It is working against the nuclear family as a whole. We know this.
It is.
But that's a much longer conversation.
And then society turns around and looks at a woman and says, what do you mean you homeschool? Why aren't you like, what do you do? Well, I'm a homeschooling mom. Yeah, but what do you do? Well, I educate my children.
Like it's somehow less value, you know?
Yeah. And it's very demeaning to women who choose to be home and raise their kids themselves and educate their children themselves. And I'm one of them.
Well, we about went full
throttle on a bunch of things.
I don't know. It's like I was going to move this show to the front porch on the rocking chair.
Yeah.
So, folks, you got your homework now. Make sure that you're spending time researching those who will be on the ballot. Start doing that now, and start really looking hard into what your school districts are teaching and what they're saying about your involvement in your children's education.
We're going to do our best to keep you up. Oh, go ahead.
Don't forget to sign up to be an election judge on election day, and sign up to be a poll watcher if you're not going to do election judge.
And we are going to still continue. I'm doing my best to try and bring as the most up-to-date version. I mean, we still have lists that unfortunately are still changing, or we would publish them right now. I think we can probably if we had published it last week, I'd have to change it probably 3 or 4 times since the last time it was published. So we're getting very close.
You can put a list out there with an asterisk next to the name saying they're still being challenged.
Yeah, I think we're almost at that stage. So that's coming. I know a lot of people have asked. Haven't forgotten you. So stay close, guys. We really appreciate you spending the evening with us, and we will be back next week for another Rebuild Illinois. Until then, God bless you. We'll talk to you all soon.
Thanks, everyone. We love you.
Alive and well, I'm wide awake. Won't take your brand, I'm not your slave. You serve your God, Lord of the flies. I pity you and you mean mine. Lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes. Your bloody mouth unsatisfied. God sees the trap you set for me. He'll not be mocked, I will be free. We will not bend, we will not break. How dare you touch what God gave? We'll never give in, never give up, never back down. Never surrender, never surrender. Your fear will not make me behave. I won't march in your masked parade. Your hollow threats won't shut me up. I won't bow down, enough's enough. You say you'll give us what we need, as if you own the air we breathe. Stand up 100 million strong. Thought we'd lie down, well you thought wrong. We will not bend, we will not break. How dare you touch what God gave? We'll never give in, never give up, never back down. Never surrender, never surrender. Oh, I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Just keep going, keep on going. Jesus with me every step. Just keep going, keep on going. Walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Just keep going, keep on going. Jesus closer than my breath. Just keep going, keep on going. We will not bend, we will not break. How dare you touch what God gave? We'll never give in, never give up, never back down. We'll never give in, never give up, never back down.